Ratified in 1868, the 14th Amendment is quite possibly the most important constitutional amendment after the Bill of Rights. The amendment not only corrects some poor legal precedent, it also establishes the legal foundations for every civil rights law since its passage. So, a little background is necessary, which is critical to this amendment. The 14th Amendment was born of some particularly troubling historical circumstances. First, in 1857, the Supreme Court had ruled in Scott v. Sanford that African Americans, quote, are not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and can therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which that instrument provides for and secures to citizens of the United States, end quote. In other words, black people, whether enslaved or free, had no rights under the Constitution. It should go without saying that the language of the Constitution does not support this interpretation, and that today, Scott v. Sanford is widely considered one of the worst decisions in the history of the Supreme Court. Nevertheless, this situation was exacerbated by the Civil War and the end of slavery in 1865. While the 13th Amendment would officially end slavery, the Dred Scott ruling still lingered, meaning that even though they were now free, African Americans had no rights. To that end, as Southern states began the process of readmission into the Union, they began passing a set of laws called Black Codes. Black Codes did grant the recently freed some rights, such as the ability to get married and to sign contracts, but they were, on the whole, limitations. For many, these laws placed freedmen back in a situation very similar to slavery and suggested the South was unrepentant about losing the war and their peculiar institution. To that end, Congress passed a Civil Rights Bill in 1866. The bill, among other things, ended black codes and guaranteed citizenship regardless of race, color, or previous enslavement. It also guaranteed equality before the law, clearly granting freedmen, the term for formerly enslaved, equal footing to whites. President Andrew Johnson promptly vetoed the law. Congress overrode the veto, and the United States had its first civil rights law. However, the Scott verdict still remained. Could the Civil Rights Act survive a legal challenge if Scott was still the law of the land? When Southern states were allowed back into the Union, would they simply overturn the law? Something of more permanence was required. The 14th Amendment was born.